How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So what was it about the idea of killing off all the adults in a small town that appealed to you?
I just want to return to my adolescence. No, I mean, when you're sort of looking at the TV landscape and trying to come up with a concept, that seemed to be something that hadn't been explored before. I mean, and then it made sense that these people were sort of at an age where they're old enough to assume responsibility, but young enough to screw it up. So dramatically, you're creating an interesting sort of premise to explore characters.
And what about the teenage orphan character? What does that give audiences now? We live in this age of helicopter parents, and now you have these teenage orphan characters.
In some ways, it probably is their dream. In some ways, that no adults are around, that you can do whatever you want, and so it becomes this interesting exploration against the backdrop of a massive death. Yeah. How do you reinvent a society, and sort of how does it feel organic, in the sense of they put a fence around it, but the world hasn't changed. And so that, to me, seemed interesting to explore.
And as you said, they're old enough to make decisions, but young enough to...
They're going to screw up. Yeah. And so and sort of figuring out, what was the age? Was it 14? Was it 16? Was it 21? Seemed like old enough to sort of try to, not everyone's 21, but there was going to be stuff that's going to go wrong. They were going to make massive mistakes, and that's interesting dramatically.
That was interesting seeing the ages pop up on the screen, thinking, oh, would I have made the cut? Ah, no.
Oh, yeah. What is... Yeah, exactly.
Dystopias are also really popular right now. The Hunger Games, Walking Dead. Why do you think viewers want to go there?
I don't really have any sort of general idea what everybody's thinking they want to watch. But again, it's a fractured landscape, and you can, and certainly something like this, you can appeal to a niche audience, if you will, and hopefully then it translates to a bigger audience as well.
I guess what you're kind of getting at, is there something in the zeitgeist? Is there something you're tapping into? Is there something about dystopias that feels particularly timely or relevant?
Well, I think if you look at global warming, if you look at the sort of the end of resources, and I don't think it's particular to this age, but I do think we might have this feeling it's not going to last forever. And this is sort of a heightened way of examining that.
I'm speaking to Michael McGowan. His new drama series, Between, premieres tomorrow on City and Show Me in Canada, as well as internationally on Netflix. So you started working on Between with the Canadian network City.
Yeah.
But then Netflix and Show Me stepped in to help make it happen. What impact could streaming services have on Canadian TV?
Well, it's a way to get them made and to get the budgets up there. I mean, you work, like City came on board, they liked the concept, they put some money into development, and it was always under the idea that we would get an international partner. And then when Netflix came on, it was really easy. Like, we like it, let's go. And so it's sort of as easy or as impossible as that. Like, you're always looking for a way to get the show made. And so once they were in, we were going, like it could have been a traditional streaming broadcaster. The interesting thing for me is sort of watching, it's exploding on Twitter, but you're sort of seeing Brazil or Germany or England. And it's a very interesting how our world has really shrunk, in the sense of, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, 63 million Netflix subscribers have access to the show. And that's a different paradigm from even doing a film where, if you're fortunate enough, to show it at TIFF or other festivals, you do that, and you sort of almost hand sell the show. Whereas this, it's just, here it is. Yeah. It's interesting.
How recent do you see that? Have you seen that shift happen?
Well, I think it's been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And I think that is, like, we can all sort of talk about dramas that we like that come from everywhere else. It used to be sort of like a show on Netflix that I've recently seen is Broadchurch, which I think is great. You sort of find it through Netflix or something that you missed on the traditional broadcaster, you can see. And I think the conversation becomes, what show are you watching, at the same time as seeing it on a traditional broadcaster.
We've seen Danish shows like The Killing, for example, which I can't think of a time when a Danish show would have come over here and been, broadly popular.
Yeah, and you wonder what the numbers are really, but it's sort of, whether it's in the cultural elite or it sort of transcends that and becomes part of very mass consumerism. And that's a great thing about trying to make even like a show like Between. You can make it 21 and under and make it work on a big level because there's enough of an audience because you're going globally.
Yeah.
And sort of like The Killing, yeah, it's a Danish show. Is the average person watching it? I don't know,
Yeah.
but there's enough of whether it's a long tail or whatever, enough people watching it that it works as.
Even if it's a niche show, you find that niche audience globally.
Exactly, which is a difference. And that's the fun. I mean, that's the fun part about being a creator is you can create something that doesn't need to work for everybody. So therefore, it can be hopefully smarter and more engaging because you're not trying to please everybody. And that's I mean, the traditional broadcasters needed to get the biggest audience possible.
Yeah, there is an interesting creative challenge about that, isn't there? Though. About trying to appeal broadly and still do something interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of have this feeling, this philosophy that the particular reveals the universal. So something like One Week is a very Canadian story about a guy going across on a motorcycle and it wears its sort of patriotic heart on its sleeve. And yet, I think it works internationally because it's a universal story. So if you get the details right, like sort of like you're talking about The Killing, those details you get right, you're thinking, oh, I'm learning about this world, this cold, dark place, which is not so unfamiliar to us Canadians, but it seems exotic, but yet relatable because the story is universal.
Is that how you balance thinking about a Canadian audience versus a global one? No,
I just think about an audience. I really just try to say, okay, whatever the world I'm creating, I want to be true to that world.
Yeah.
And there's not a right or a wrong way to do that. Like I don't have sort of like, here's the McGowan rules for how it needs to unfold, but I try to keep within whatever I'm trying to do.
So whatever that particular is, you stay true to that, and there's something universal.
Yeah, like for example, like because it's younger people, I'm not trying to write as if like, in a particular, I'm trying to capture their unique voices, but I'm not saying, oh, this is the voice that writing for 16-year-olds. I'm just trying to capture the voice of the characters, which I think is true, not for a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old or anything like that.
And in terms of setting, Between is very non-specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those sort of decisions you make. Like it didn't. So, for example, it didn't need to. When we did Still Mine, it was clearly we took advantage of the Bay of Fundy, New Brunswick, everything else. This didn't need to. It could have been small town America or it could have been small town Canada. So it didn't need to wear its cultural heart on its sleeve because it wouldn't serve the story. So it wasn't like we specifically said it's not Canadian, but we made a point of not rooting it anywhere for hopefully that people in different places could identify with it.
The story didn't exactly need it.
Yeah, like it wasn't like, something like Orphan Black takes place in Toronto. It doesn't wear its Toronto heart on its sleeve, but it uses that when we weren't really looking to. It's a small town. It's a fairly generic small town, and so if it happened to be set in the oil sands, and we would have taken advantage of that and made that part of the story.
Okay, I want to ask you a little bit more about the business side.
Sure.
Big networks have to fund Canadian production. Do you think Netflix should do the same?
Well, they are here. I mean, I don't know enough to sort of sit here and say, okay, here's how it all should work. And certainly seeing the way the CRTC is going down and knowing enough, but not enough to sort of have some opinions, but not enough that I won't bury myself. I think we live in this juggernaut in English Canada that we're beside the States who will overwhelm us. And so what is a Canadian story? You're a Canadian artist. What it is very hard to define. What it is for you, what it is for me, what it means to somebody that's not an artist that consumes it. Is it Murdoch Mysteries? Is it a Michael Ondaatje book? Is it Orphan Black? Is it Between?
Yeah.
I can't sit here and say I have the answer for it. But there's a certain Canadianness that I think is worthwhile fostering and encouraging. And like I said, as you as an artist, what would it be for you? I don't know. Can you define it?
It's very difficult to define. We have such a big country, such a range of stories, such a new history.
Yeah. And so
in a lot of ways. And
so when I think of those things, like I've worked for the CBC before as a creator, and I would like to work for them again. And I think something like the CBC, more than anybody, probably has a mandate to not make a generic show, but again, you said something like The Killing. Say The Killing was set in Toronto. I mean, it's a murder mystery. Like, does that make, because it was populated with Tim Hortons and, you know, Canadian Tire-isms, does that make it,
Yeah.
is that part of the cultural fabric? I don't have the answer for that, but I do think that we've developed this rich cultural history in literature and music and film and television, and I think it adds something to the country.
Well, Canadian television also gets its fair share of criticism. John Doyle, the TV critic at the Globe and Mail, has said that Canadian shows that get funding are, quote from him, dull, mediocre, and half-assed. Do you think the Canadian TV industry has what it takes to survive this internet TV revolution?
Yeah, I do. I think if you look at any country, there's a lot of half-assed. There's a lot of stuff that, I mean, the networks, the best and the brightest and the most money, what's their success rate? 10%, 15%? I mean, you look at all the pilots they rolled, all the money they put into it, and all the failures, and they get hammered. Now, like, that's the most money, the smartest people, that, like, they've got every advantage.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to sort of say, here's the show that sucks, and this is a reason, you're going to find that in every country in the world. And even in that show, you're going to have people that love that show, you know? And so what people want isn't universal. And so, yes, I do. I mean, we've got great creators that work on both sides of the borders, that work internationally. And I think this landscape actually allows trying to make smart television.
Yeah, I would say the same is true of music. I think we've encouraged a musical culture here that allows for some more expressiveness, some more intelligence. And you'd say the same for television?
Yeah, I mean, well, in the music, you look at the Tragically Hip, who aren't huge on the other side of the border. Does that invalidate them? No. I mean, they're, you know, and so, I mean, you have to define success some way. And I think that's where you get in trouble with the arts. Like, what is success and what does it mean? Like, if this show, you know, runs for 5 seasons and gets 50 million viewers, does that, I mean, I don't know what the success of it, what it's supposed to be, you know, because you can't use numbers anymore because everybody's watching stuff in different platforms.
Yeah. It's getting very difficult to track the metrics. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. And so, but I, you know, I mean, I'm obviously biased because I'm a great Canadian creator. No, we shouldn't. I say no, damn it. Cut those people off.
We've been talking a lot about the business now. What is it about the new world of streaming TV that gets you excited creatively?
Because you can make you can go against the formula. You can tell serialized stories. You can think about projects that don't have to appeal to everyone. Yeah. And you know, from Netflix to Amazon to Show Me, the people are looking for original content that stands apart from the rest of the stuff. So so for me, it's amazing. Like, it's not like you can just go to and same with the traditional broadcasters as well. So you can go to the traditional broadcasters, you can go to the more niche players, and so you have more options. And it seems possible now. Like, I mean, if an idiot like me can get a Netflix show going, then somebody else is going to be listening to this going, well, if, you know, why can't I do it? And I think that is a fantastic thing.
Do you think that's the secret behind this kind of golden age of television? The fact that there's so many different platforms, you can kind of go to the avenue or the vehicle that's right for what you're doing creatively? Yeah,
I do. I think it's a huge advantage because I don't think you can get this show made with the kind of exposure and the kind of push and the kind of hype behind it going to the traditional networks, because it wouldn't appeal to that. And yet you know, I mean, Jeanette McCurdy, our star, has 6.2 million Twitter followers. Like, the McCurdians are going ballistic on this stuff. It's a world I don't understand, which is fantastic. So, you know, it's all, yes, I do think that makes a huge difference.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much.